And welcome to today's Fire Authority meeting, the 24th of July. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Jim Vernon, Councillor Terry Cox, Councillor Jodie Stoll, PCC Gary Godden, and they're all that have at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. If we could move to declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest to declare? Are we happy to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 22nd of May this year?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. We've got a few chairs' announcements. Members will know that we have now concluded our inspection with the Inspectorate, and myself and Councillor Butler had our interesting interview as part of the process. I really want to thank all staff and everybody concerned in actually supporting the process and actually ensuring that the inspection process the inspector was able to look at the breadth and depth of the fire service, what the work that we carry out. We now await publication of the inspection. It's expected to be in the next couple of months, although I think the formal report will not be published until November, so we wait for their findings. I think it's important to think about where we are at the moment in terms of the weather and the exceptional, how busy the fire service has been over the past few weeks with the weather and the significant incidents that sustain increased calls and associated with hot weather. I think we need to recognise the support Nottinghamshire Fire Service has been giving to Derbyshire Fire Service, especially during the moorland fires. And I think, again, it demonstrates how we work well collaborating in partnership with Derbyshire Fire Service. I think it's important that we thank the staff, the crew, and the continued professionalism and a range of incidents across Nottinghamshire. I think we just really need to thank staff for all their hard work at this particular challenging time. And I think finally, it's just to remind members, on the 11th of September, there will be a members' seminar. I think it's really, really important. If people don't have it in their diaries, please put it in your diaries now. Richard Butler has actually suggested another way of actually keeping that information. But I think it's important because obviously we're looking at the fire service moving into the mayoral model, and there are other associated things that we might need to be thinking about. So I think please make sure you've got it in your diaries and you can attend. If we can now move to item 5, the draft statement of accounts and narrative report that Maria will be taking us through. I believe this has actually already been through the Financial Resources Committee, but I think I'll hand over to Maria to present the paper.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is a report for members to scrutinise the draft statement of accounts for 2024-25, which are attached at Appendix A. The statement of accounts is produced in accordance with the Code of Practice on Local Government Authority Accounting, which is published by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, and it was required to be published on the Fire Authority's website and made available to our external auditors by the 30th of June, in line with the statutory deadline in the Accounts and Audit Regulations, and that was achieved.
Is your mic on?
So, the draft final accounts have been presented to the Fire Authority so that you have the opportunity to scrutinise those prior to the audit of the accounts. Once the external audit is completed, that's shared with the Fire Authority with a further report that's presented to the Finance and Resources Committee, and that will request approval for the Head of Finance and the Chair of the Finance and Resources Committee to sign off the final version of the accounts when they are complete. So the statement of accounts is quite a large document, I appreciate, but there are 4 key statements which are on pages 20 to 25 of the accounts. The first one is the movement in reserve statement, which is around showing the movement in the authority's usable and unusable reserves during the year. And the second one is the comprehensive income and expenditure account, which is similar to the profit and loss account if you would be looking at a private sector company's annual accounts. And that basically shows the items of income and expenditure during the year, which are the accounting costs of providing services, the balance sheet, which shows the authority's assets and liabilities at the 31st of March 2026, and they are matched with the authority's reserves, and the cash flow statement, which shows the changes in cash and cash equivalents during the year and shows how the service has activities generate and use cash. And then there are a sequence of notes that basically break down those 4 statements over the various different elements within the accounts. So the movement in reserve statement shows that the usable reserves for the year were 11.097 million, made up of the general fund reserve of 5.083 million, which is just over 8% of the annual budget, and the earmarked reserves of 6 million just over, which are set aside for specific purposes. There was an underspend in 2025-26 of £274,000, and that has been basically utilised to remove the requirement to use the budget pressure reserve, to do a very small transfer within earmarked reserves and a very small contribution to the general fund balance. The statement of accounts also incorporates a narrative statement which gives a useful overview of both the accounts themselves and the authority's activities during the year, and sets out the context for the accounts. It's therefore quite a useful starting point for somebody reading the accounts for the first time. The audit of the accounts, as we said, the statements were produced by the 30th of June, put onto our website and made available to our external auditors, KPMG, and the publication date for the final audited accounts is the 31st of January 2027, and we're currently on target for that, hoping to get the accounts signed off by the end of this calendar year. Financial implications on this report are the statutory audit fees, which are set out in section 3, £108,310. That is set by the Public Sector Audit Appointments Organisation. So in terms of the recommendations, the scrutinise and gain assurance for the annual accounts.
Do members have any questions? That's unusual. Thank you, Maria. I mean, I've got a couple of... Sorry.
Is this for the whole report? Or
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Right, so I guess I have 3 points to raise, just very quickly. So I was going through the report. One thing that I picked up was that there is obviously rounding issues sometimes when a report is drawn. I just wanted to mention that the general fund reserve is quoted as 5.083 million. Now there is another 2 points in which it mentioned as 5.082 million. It's rather small, really, but I just wanted to mention it to make sure that when the final report is made, we make sure we round in the same way. The next point that I wanted to raise have to do with recruitment and holding vacancies. Now I understand that that has been used as a measure, and I want to understand if this was a one-off sustainability measure or we expect it to happen again. The last one is about other creditors, and I just wanted to say that I just noticed the slight increase on other creditors from 4.9 million to 7.9 million. Just wanted to understand a little bit about that increase and what drove it really. Thank you.
Go ahead, Maria.
Okay. We have picked up those rounding issues actually, and they have been corrected in our working draft that's been being used with the auditors. In terms of the recruitment and holding vacancies, I think during 24-25 there was an active sort of decision to look at doing some of that in order to balance the budget. And we do have normally a vacancy rate that's built into our budgets anyway to reflect the turnover of staff. So, but that's a fixed amount, 8% on the Green Book side of the workforce. In terms of that other creditors figure, I need to go and look into that and perhaps give you an answer outside of the meeting, if that's okay.
I've got a couple of questions, Maria. One is about, the focus of KPMG. Where do you think they're going to be focusing on this year from an audit perspective? And are we satisfied the reserves remain appropriate given the financial challenges of the fire service?
So the focus of KPMG is obviously to continue the build back of assurance around the accounts to be able to give a clean opinion. As members will recall, initially we had a disclaimed opinion, a qualified opinion. Last year it was changed to a modified opinion, which is obviously a step in the right direction, and the auditors will be looking to try and achieve a clean opinion possibly this year, more likely to be next year. So there's a big focus on our fixed assets. So one of the things we've done as part of this year's preparation for the audit is to have all our assets, assets valued so that the auditors can see all those figures are up to date. And it's basically making sure that we deal with all the auditors' queries on all the key elements that sit within the balance sheet, particularly, really. The second question, which I forgot what you said there.
It's really adequacy of reserves?
Adequacy of reserves, yeah. In terms of the adequacy of reserves, the fact that the general reserve is around 8%, that's quite reasonable and appropriate for the fire authority to hold. I think once they go below 5%, that's the trigger that the SIP for code practice normally sort of flags as being potentially a risk.
Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So, because we're having a chat, I'd just like to land this one. The need to look on finance, it's not in here, but it's likely to come when we get transferred to the Mayor's office. Any costs will go down to this authority. So we need to keep an eye on that in the accounts, because it's getting, we've just been landed 1.9 million at the moment for LGR, which we haven't got, which is not very nice, to be honest. So we'll probably end you know, on the SIP, you can deal with that debt when you get it. But we need to, and the same with the police. I was at the police the other end on Monday, and I think people are a bit naive to think it's all going to roll along. But I could kick this argument off any time over how we transfer to the Mayor's office, because at the moment I don't think they've got the expertise in the Mayor's office to deal with it, but more so is how this would affect our service if you suddenly had to put a lot of funding towards a transfer into that. And I've not spoken to Maria, I just thought we're having a chat, so I might as well raise it in here, but make people wary of it, because all the costs have got to be paid by the local authority that's transferring. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Craig, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. I suppose we've sort of briefed you before about how we're having these conversations, myself and the Chief, over in Derbyshire, in terms of the transition with MHLG. We've got another conversation, I think, with MHLG, I think on the 5th of August, if my memory serves me right. We've also had some conversations with the MCA team, the Mayor's corporate leadership team. They came to have a sort of a meet and greet session here with SLT here. We've all made the point around transition funding. In a previous paper from MHLG, there was a £2.1 million was earmarked for transition through devolution to fire. We are out of scope of that 2.1 million because it was the initial people that were moving through devolution, is my understanding of what I've heard on those meetings. But we have been told by MHLG that they are looking at further and future transition funding that is likely to be retrospectively paid, so from April next year. So you'll also know as well, that I think we've took it through the last Financial Resources Committee, you have agreed to an earmark reserve of £100,000 to start pump priming. This because the work still needs to be done. And I've had a conversation only in the last week with Maria to start thinking about how we leverage more funding, because £100,000 isn't going to cut it. And also a conversation I've had with the clerk, because you're clerk in terms of representation of the clerk represents the authority's interests, and it's strange when I talk about the authority will still be an authority, but it won't be this authority.
Yeah.
So there is a concern about how that moves across, both from myself and the chief over in Derbyshire, how we kind of deal with that. To that point, I've been in conversations with the clerk because of the hours of work that your clerk does, about increasing the hours the clerk does for you as the authority's interests, and about that relationship with EMCA, starting to have those conversations. It is on every meeting with the, even the emails exchanged this week, excuse me, about transition funding, where that's going to land, because if that all depends on what vision for fire the Mayor has, and there is a case for change being discussed. The case for change at the minute, as I see it, is it's the transfer of authority powers, because that's the thing that's been laid in law through the Devolution and Community Empowerment Act. So anything beyond that, so if we want to do more, if the Mayor wants to do more around collaboration, integration and those things, that comes with a cost. And I would suspect that all constituent authorities, subject to LGR, whether you're constituent authorities as you are now as county and city, or in the two unitaries, whatever they end up looking like, I would imagine there'd be an interest for you to do that. So I suppose that run through is just to say we are painfully aware that you can't just move for free. And it comes with
that's all I was
cost.
doing, was just putting this down as a clear marker. There is a problem here because it's going to affect frontline policing if we get too big a sum.
And I think
they're not policing all wrong on fire.
Yeah, and I think the value of having known you as long as I have as working one of the members, John, I think I completely hear what you say.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lee? John?
Thank you. A very good point from Councillor Clark. I've mentioned it many times. Is I get the frustration with LGR, I get it, but the argument is the facilities that are going over to the city and the money that's going over to the city is still within arm's reach to a certain extent. However, when we go over to the mayoral model, our money will go to the mayor, and that will be further than arm's reach, it will be Derbyshire. And as I've argued with you and in this meeting, is I want to make sure any money that we have here is spent within our region, and it isn't then slipped out to Derbyshire and to other areas. We know we have fire stations we want to bring forward. I want to make sure they're in the plan or being brought forward before we hand over any authority or any money to a mayor and a Derbyshire larger fire authority. And I want to make sure that is our primary goal, is to make sure that projects that we want to bring forward are brought forward before we leave.
Thank you for both of those comments, Councillor Lee and Councillor Clark. I think they are very, very, very important. Craig, the Chief Fire Officer, has given his view on where we are, and we know there's a lot more work to be done. One of the reasons why I didn't really want the discussion to actually be spoken today is because I think there's a lot that we do need to discuss. I think the member seminar in September will give us the space to discuss it and not necessarily be in front of the cameras. But I think there's things that we probably don't know and things that we still need to ask, and there is still a lot of unknowns. But I do take on board all that's said, and I think we do need to give ourselves the space, the time, and actually be informed about things before we actually sit down and talk. So we can actually move back to the draft statement of accounts. I think these actually present a good position for the authority. I think, I've not been on authority as long as some others, but I think this is probably the first time we've seen an underspend in a long time. So from that point of view, I think that puts the fire service in a good position. I do take on board your point, John O'Lee, that we need to ensure that we actually are able to use as much as resources of the fire service for Nottinghamshire and not necessarily Derbyshire, but I think we need to discuss that outside this meeting at a later date. So with that in mind, and obviously thank Maria for putting together this draft statement. A lot of work has gone into it, and the recommendation is for members to scrutinise the draft report as attached on Appendix A. So are we happy with that recommendation?
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
I think this is you again, Maria, annual governance statement.
Thank you, Chair. So the annual governance statement is another element that's part of a statutory sort of framework in terms of production of reports. And the recommendation is to approve the annual governance statement in draft as it is, and obviously to delegate authority to the chair of the authority and the chief fire officer to update this for any retrospective factors which occur between now and the publication of the actual final annual governance statement and accounts. So the annual governance statement, as I've said, is a statutory document. It explains the processes and procedures in place to enable the service to carry out its functions effectively, and it contains details of the most recent review of governance arrangements and sets out challenges for those arrangements going forward. The authority must approve the annual governance statement each year prior to adopting the statement of accounts, and the draft annual governance statement has also been included in the draft unaudited 25-26 statement of accounts, which were published on our website, as I said earlier, by the 30th of June 2026. The draft annual governance statement obviously is as at the 31st of March 2026 and considers factors up to the 30th of June, but there is a requirement for that to reflect any retrospective factors that occur between the 30th of June and the date of publication. So that's why that extra recommendation is in there around any amendments that need to be made, and those being signed off by the Chief Fire Officer and the Chair of the Fire Authority. The authorities approved and adopted a code of corporate governance which is consistent with the 7 principles of good governance as identified by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, and you can see in the actual document itself there is a diagram that shows that those 7 principles of good governance, which is unfortunately figure 1, about 3 pages in. The draft statement of annual governance sets out that how the service has complied with the current code of corporate governance during the year, and its scope of responsibility, the purpose of the governance framework itself, a review of its effectiveness and further developments. And as part of the conversation that's already taken place, one of the key elements of that is the move to the East Midlands Combined County Authority devolution programme. In terms of the annual governance statement, there's always a conclusion that's put together for that, and that gives a conclusion on the governance arrangements for the Fire Authority, and that conclusion is that the governance arrangements remain sound and continue to operate effectively, and no significant governance issues have been identified. And then in section 2.3 of the report, it sets out the rationale and reasoning behind this conclusion, which obviously includes the fact we've got a very well developed and evolving governance arrangements in place. Our policies and procedures continue to be updated and reviewed. The Code of Corporate Governance was adopted by the authority, and the SITFA Financial Management Code has been adopted by the authority, so we're working in line with all the regulations. The authority's external auditors provided us with a modified opinion for the 24-25 statement of accounts, which shows an improvement on recent financial years following the backlog that happened generally across the public sector with accounts. And the external auditor's commentary on value for money in terms of use of resources again concluded that there were no significant weaknesses. Our internal auditors have also produced an annual report which has given us substantial level of assurance in terms of their work as well, and obviously our latest HMIC FRS inspection provided a rating of good, and that's the basis really for the conclusion that's been put together.
Thank you, Maria. Do we have any questions? Councillor Ray?
Thank you, Chair. We also look at the bits in terms of the report. Perhaps I've gone through the wrong thing here. I just wanted to say, I mean, obviously, to thank Maria for the report. I think I've been on the Fire Authority like John has and others like John for some time, and we've always been blessed with fantastic finance officers. And I think, we're reassured when we look at this. If we're not asking questions of the public, obviously we've gone through the documents, we're pretty assured where we are financially, and it looks pretty good. And obviously, even in times where things have been uncertain, I think now, obviously in terms of interest or issues or costs or fuel, etc., we're at quite a time of quite turbulent. So I just wonder if that's how you actually take that into account, because there's potential variance in terms of interest rates, isn't there? We could have, with international affairs and stuff, obviously, oil and gas going through the ceiling, which is going to cost us a lot of money, and there's other sort of issues related to that, and it must be difficult to build that assurance in, because to a certain extent it's not just in the gambling, but in terms of interest rates, there's arguments now, isn't there, whether they're going up by 0.5%, and we don't know what's going to be happening with fuel, etc.
Yeah, so obviously we do have contingencies that are built into the budget to sort of provide that buffer for some of those potential areas of risk. And the reason why we do the regular monitoring is obviously to keep trajectory in place on what the finances of the authority are looking like, and bringing those back to the Finance and Resources Committee, and obviously to the Fire Authority as well. It is a case of constantly sort of monitoring all those aspects that you just outlined, really, to make sure that we're modifying if we've got to look at making changes through the year to try and keep on track. It's basically the budget monitoring process, really. So.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for your compliments about the finance staff, Nick, in all honesty, because we have been blessed over a long period of time. Just to give you some wider assurance as well, there's 2 or 3 papers here that we'll talk about, so statement of accounts, annual government statement, statements of assurance. When you read across them, it builds the picture of strength about how the authority and the service is running. I'd also sort of say on that, fluctuations around things that are going on beyond our control. I think we've got quite a mature corporate risk register now, where setting a balanced budget is one of the risks that is generally stays at high risk because of those turbulent times. And again, that's another thing that comes into Finance and Resources Committee, and we talk about it routinely at your strategic leadership team as well. So just give you some added assurance that it is in our minds.
Thank you, Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Chair. Just to share that I'm very pleased to see that obviously we have substantial assurance in terms of our internal audit, so that's really good news. I just wanted to ask, because I understand the County Council audit team is doing work in terms of preparing internal audit reports, and I just want to see, because some of those were produced in draft rather than completed forms, and I just want officers to reassure us that that doesn't have an impact on the level of assurance that is given to us in this report. The second point was about obviously the transition, just making sure that we need to make sure that when we transition the Fire Authority to MCA, that those governance, the robust governance arrangements that we have now remain the same.
Okay, so in terms of the audit reports, there were 5 audit reports carried out last year. 3 of those are now finalised, and the other 2 will be finalised for the next Finance and Resources Committee. All but one have got reasonable or substantial assurance, and the one that's got limited assurance we are looking at the moment to feedback on that. So I think that in terms of the assurance that gives overall, in terms of their assessment, that they've actually kind of considered the latest audit reports as part of that treatment.
So yeah, it's work in progress, isn't it? Because I was reading the report, probably things have happened since the report was written and now, so thanks so much for that. That's it.
Councillor Battenbush?
Yeah, just specifically on the governance thing, I just want to say that I think the last 15 months have been a really good test of the governance of the Fire Authority, because we had quite significant changes 15 months ago. I think we've had new political structures established on the Fire Authority, collaborative working amongst all of the committee. So I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. Actually, the governance structures were well placed. Councillors and officers have worked well together. There hasn't been any substantial difficulties on the authority. I think that's a testament to staff and councillors. I think the issues that people have talked about changes to structures in the future, as we've said before, there's still a lot of water to go under that bridge. and there'll be further discussions, including at the member seminar and elsewhere. So I think in terms of this report, I think we should note it, accept where we are. We're in a good place.
Thank you, Councillor Barton. So I think I would echo that. I think if we would think about where we are 18 months ago, I think we've travelled a long way, and I think we're doing extremely well. One thing I would say though is that and I'm sure Councillor Butler may well have something to say on this as well. Is that our governance is strong, but as we know, governance is something that we continually strive for improvement. But we do need to make sure, as part of this transition, that we actually continue to have robust governance, but that's a conversation for another day. But it was interesting, the inspector's theme around governance. It'll be interesting to see what comes out in the report around that later on in the end. There may be some stuff that we might need to think about, but on the whole, in terms of this report, thank you, Maria, for the report. I think it is solid. I think our governance arrangements are strong and robust, but it's like anything, there's always something more that we can do.
Just to add to that, it's all very open as well. It's, all the reports we get are so detailed. Sometimes some might say they're too detailed because there's so much information to take in. But it's a sign that the communication and the working is there between the management and the committee and the authority. So yeah, and as you say, Chairman, the inspection result will be interesting because we certainly were questioned rather a lot.
I'm going to have to correct you there, Chairman.
Yes, yeah.
And with that, are we happy to approve the recommendations, approve the draft annual governance statement for 25-26 and delegate authority to the Chair and the Chief Bar Officer to update the annual governance statement?
Agreed?
Yes.
And if we can now move on to item 7, exciting Treasury management that always seems to get people going. So, Maria, do you want to move on to that?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the annual report for Treasury Management for 25-26, and the recommendation is that members scrutinise and gain assurance on the Treasury Management activity during the financial year as required under the Local Government Act 2003. So Treasury Management is basically the organisation's borrowing, investments, cash flows, banking, money markets and capital market transactions, and it's around the effective control and risk around these activities and pursuit of sort of optimum performance consistent with those risks. It's worthwhile me kind of highlighting that our Treasury Management strategy and principles work on principles of ensuring the security of our funding first, the liquidity of our funding next, and the return as a third element, and that's obviously because we're managing public money. So the requirements of the Code of Practice that we work to are we obviously have a Treasury Management Policy Statement which sets out our policies and objectives. We have Treasury Management Practices which sets out the manner in which the authority seeks to achieve those policies. We have a receipt by the Fire Authority of an annual Treasury Management Strategy statement for the year ahead. We carry out a mid-year review and report that to the Fire Authority, and then we produce this annual report each year which covers the activities of the previous year. The delegation by the authority of the responsibilities for implementing and monitoring Treasury Management policies and practices, and the execution and administration of the Treasury Management decisions, and that is delegated to the Finance and Resources Committee. So the report includes an economic review of 2025-26, and as members have sort of highlighted, in the last sort of 12 months there has been some activity more globally that's impacted on some of the things around inflation, interest rates, etc. A review of our capital activity during 2025-26. A review of our borrowing and capital financing requirement, a review of the investment and cash management strategy, and investment and cash activity during 25-26, a review of the year-end investments and cash and usable reserves position, and a summary of compliance with the Treasury and prudential limits which were set for 2025-26. We employ a specialist treasury management expertise that supports us with MUFG, Mitsubishi UFG Financial Group, who help us as our treasury management advisors, and I meet with them regularly to get their feedback on the global position, the sorts of things we should be looking at in terms of investments and borrowing, etc. So within the overall report, you've got some tables there in table 1 that show our public works loan board rates during the year, and what they look like in terms of the different levels of borrowing over that longer and shorter period of time. We didn't actually take out any external borrowing during the year because we didn't need to. A review of the capital activity, which shows table 2, our capital expenditure, and how that was funded during 2025-26. And you can see that that was funded from grants, receipts and revenue contributions, and we didn't have to use external borrowing, we used internal borrowing. A review of the borrowing and capital financing requirement, table 3, that shows our opening balance, our capital expenditure, our MRP and VRP charges, which are a proxy for depreciation effectively, and our capital financing requirement at the end of the year. And then table 4 shows some revenue savings generated from voluntary revenue provision, because as members will recall, as part of the budget, we identified that where possible we would try and utilise any underspends to mitigate the need for us to take out external borrowing, and that's obviously what we did during that last financial year. And then table 5 shows our gross external borrowing and the capital financing requirement, and you can see gross external borrowing position. We started the year at 29.9 million and ended the year at the same point, 29.9 million, so we didn't take out any external borrowing during the year. And then there are a number of metrics that we utilise as part of the Treasury Management Code of Practice, which set out some boundaries, the authorised limit, the operational boundary, and the financing costs as a proportion of net revenue stream, which basically are within table 5, which show our debt and financing ratios, and our target financing costs was 6.2%, our actual financing costs were 5.4%, so again under in terms of what we predicted. And then we also have a review of our investment and cash management strategy during the year, and that's where we put our cash with banks, building societies, local authorities and money market funds to basically generate some interest on those. But as I've said, the principle for that is based on security first, liquidity second and return third, because of the fact that we are obviously dealing with public funds. And we have a limit on the amount of money that we can put with any one organisation, again to protect the cash that's involved, and so that's a £4 million counterparty limit. So in terms of the activity during 25-26, at the 31st of March we had just over £3 million of principal in short-term investments and £9 million of principal in cash equivalent investments, which mean that we can convert those into cash within less than 3 months. And all the investment activity during the year confirmed to the approved strategy. We had no liquidity difficulties. We have during the year been looking at implementing money market funds as one of the options for us to do very short-term investments because they are slightly better in terms of return but very secure. So that's something that's now in place. And then if you look in the last section, which is a summary of the compliance, what I have done there is put that into colour-coded red, amber, green. So you can see the majority of the sections are green in terms of the compliance being in line with or under what was expected. There are three areas where it's amber. One of them, unfortunately, is coded green, but it should be amber, which is the last one on the first page. Upper limit for internal borrowing as a percentage of the capital financing requirement, 20%. We did have some breaches during the year around that. The lower limit for proportion of net debt to gross debt, again, that was slightly above the percentage of 50% at 56.7%. And those two elements, I know this is very technical stuff, so I appreciate it's difficult, but basically we got a big pension grant during the year, and that big pension grant meant that we got more funds in our bank account than we would have anticipated. So therefore we were slightly over in terms of the limits that we thought we'd have in terms of that income, which meant that we obviously had a little bit more to invest. And as part of the outturn, we actually generated more income from Treasury management activities during the year as a result of that. So it's again it sort of looks negative in terms of being amber, but it's actually positive in terms of the fact that we generated some extra interest on that funding. So although these are breaches, they're kind of positive in a way because of the fact that we've obviously got more funds than we thought we'd have, and that's all to do with the firefighters pension scheme and the McLeod and Matthews grant. And then the final one, the investment yield benchmark. Our average rate of return was 4.01%, and the SONIA rate, which is what we compare against, is 4.22%. So we're slightly under there, but that is because we have this counterpart limit that restricts the amount that we can place with specific organisations. So we're not putting too much money with one particular organisation, but 4.01% is not bad as a rate of interest really from from the last sort of 12 months. So I appreciate that's probably really technical and I've probably given you a headache, but if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary, but I think it's important to recognise the vital role Treasury management plays in making sure that we actually safeguard public money and we actually have oversight over the authorities' activities. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the role that it plays. And when we think about the environment, the uncertainty, you talked about interest rates and inflation, it's happening. We can see that the authorities' financial treasury management has been managed effectively. So I think it's just important to recognise that. Councillor Cosmosis.
Thank you, sir. This is a very interesting report. Sorry, it's one of my first meetings, so I'm just getting to learn everything here.
You get a little bit excited, we know.
I didn't say that at the start. She knows my passion about it. But no, looking at the report, right, I really like so the fact that the Fire Authority invests, and you talked about the SONIA kind of benchmark, and we say that we are slightly below this. So one of my first questions would be, how does this benchmark with other fire authorities? Do they have a similar kind of outlook, or are there others that overachieve maybe on the SONIA benchmark? Perhaps you don't have the answer now, but that's just an interesting question that came to my mind. The second one was the 5.5 million of cash balances that you used to support capital expenditure. That's internal borrowing. So we use internal borrowing from cash reserves instead of external borrowing. And could you just elaborate why that is the case and whether that affects reserve levels, or does it have an issue with liquidity of reserves? Just reassures that obviously that's not a problem necessarily. And the last one was at table 2, where it has a revised budget and an actual expenditure, which is slightly different there for the capital expenditure. And there's a slippage of something there, definitely, and I'm not sure what that was. Maybe after probably materialized, maybe we didn't have to spend the money, or could you just explain that as well? Thanks.
Okay, we don't specifically benchmark with other fire authorities as it is. In terms of the SONIA rate, that is something that is part of the code that basically each fire authority would compare themselves against, because it's a kind of recognised metric effectively. In terms of the internal borrowing is obviously a lot cheaper than borrowing externally, particularly with interest rates being as they are. And if we go down the route of external borrowing, we tie ourselves into particular periods of time. And at the moment, our Treasury management specialists are saying that now is not a good time to be borrowing long term. The PWLB rates are higher, so we're trying to look at what's the best time for us to do any of that long-term borrowing, and it's likely during the coming financial year, the current financial year, that we will be doing some external borrowing. So we're looking at when we make those decisions. And then the third element that you mentioned, which was around the slippage. There was some slight slippage in the capital programme last year. I think that was reported to the last meeting of the Finance and Resources Committee.
Thank you.
Councillor Khan?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark. It's a thorough report. To be honest, you already touched that already, and thank you, Councillor Constance. He actually asked my question already, but I just wanted to know that looking at the internal borrowing around 15.5% under the 20% cap, obviously has minimized the interest exposure on that. But my question is, if you, while our investment income exceeded budget around 227,000, okay, so due to the higher cash balance, and our average return, obviously you already touched the 4.1%, which is slightly lagged behind the SONIA benchmark. So for me, what liquidity restrictions that you think that prevented us from matching or beating the benchmark rate?
Okay, so one of the things we are talking to our Treasury management consultants about is some of the targets that we've got. So the 20% is quite low when you do compare that with other organisations. So that is something that potentially we will be looking at to increase that. And then particularly because we know we're getting the pension grant for the next year or 2 years. So that 20% is probably giving us a metric that's perhaps not appropriate now. And then the other one around the SONIA rates, one of the things we've done is looked into investing in money market funds, and they allow you to do those investments very quickly without because they're set up basically as arrangements through the bank. So that will allow us probably to get nearer to that SONIA rate than we have done in the past. But the funds take quite a while to set up in terms of the process with the financial institutions. So that's why it's something that I think it was put as a target last year, and we're now in a position where we can start to use those. So hopefully the next annual report should show an increase in the yield benchmark.
Thank you.
Okay, I think this is like some of the other reports. I think at the moment it's a solid report in terms of where we're at. But when we think about some of the things that we're looking at, obviously building stock in Lane, fire station. When we think about we've got to do some external borrowing, it may well be prudent at the member seminar, if possible, that we can actually get the external advisors to come in to actually look at the Treasury management and to ensure all members are actually fully members. Some members are more up to date and others are more interested than others, but I think it's important going forward that perhaps we need to try and factor that in. I think as something that we need to do. Any other questions? No.
Sorry, Chair, I was going to say we are planning to give some training to members on Treasury management as part of that members seminar, a bit of a refresher, and obviously training for those that are newer to the authority.
Thank you, Maria. With that, our members too are happy to accept the recommendation. Members scrutinise and gain assurance on the Treasury management activities during 25-26 as required under the Local Government Act 2003.
Agreed.
Actually, we're going to move to perhaps a more interesting, but I think statement that Craig is actually going to take us through. But I think it's important that this is recognises the work that we do against our community risk management plan, and actually talks about the service delivery. And I think it's an area where we can actually really feel good about all the work that the fire service is doing, and actually we need to be actually going out there and publicising what this is. So over to you, Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Members have got an appendix attached to the report. As Councillor Adams just pointed out, when we talk about the green ones and the amber ones, you've probably got a monochrome paper.
Yeah.
So that sometimes doesn't help you. I have the benefit of reading it off my tablet, so that makes it somewhat easier. On this report, you've got an appendix which covers so much detail and highlights. These were brought in some years ago, really, under the framework document. Whether they still remain the case going forward in terms of change of governance and other issues will remain to be seen about how future authorities are able to do it, or our government expects you to do it as authorities in the future. What I would sort of say is that on your committees throughout the year, whether it be Community Safety Committee, HR Committee, Finance and Resources Committee, you get lots of this information throughout the year in bite-sized chunks. What I think this document is amazing at, it just makes you remind you that you're looking forward about what you've got to do in front of you, but it just makes you stop and pause just about the achievements that have been realised with the massive support of this fire authority, the staff in the fire service to deliver for communities, and it's something that when I read it, I'm super proud of. There is lots of things in there. I don't intend to go through the appendix, but some of those things. But what I would sort of say is the people that deliver this are the people that need the credit, and that's everybody that works on this site for every single fire station that you have in your fire service that you oversee. Because without them, none of this gets done. Yes, we can plan, we can lead and all those sorts of things, but we need people that can actually deliver it. And this is actually a recognition of everything they've done in the year 25-26. This is in the background. Incidents increased, and you get that at CS committee about why they're increasing down to the minutiae of the detail, and I certainly know Andy and Tom as the area managers supporting Damien, they'll be able to go into incredible detail about how that's done, and credit to them in their role. It talks about fires, it talks about road traffic collisions, and it also talks about things like appliance availability. Now, we've just gone through all of this in the last 6 months. The inspection with HMI is 6 weeks, really, but it's 6 months of effort in terms of liaising with the inspectorate. And we still retain one of the highest availabilities for on-call fire appliances in the UK Fire and Rescue Service, and 2/3 of the UK landmass is covered by on-call firefighters. And again, the massive commitment they make in their lives to providing fire cover for their communities. We've continued delivering a significant amount of safe and well visits, and that's required. We've had to push the organisation. We've had to improve and continuously improve, and hopefully the HMI will have seen that as well. And we've also, with the support of the authority, we changed the fire safety audit numbers because of what we're seeing in the built environment and the risk. We did a completely new risk-based inspection programme, and we've got crews doing far more in terms of business safety checks that's relying on the fire protection team and the higher levels of competence they have to provide quality assurance around it. So there's some things there around prevention, protection and response as well. And some of the things about the health indicators we've had along the way, we have a cultural dashboard. Now that means it's the health indicators, so sickness, grievance, fitness tests. And as you can see in there, your operational workforce have got 99.7% successful pass rates at their annual fitness test. And that is something that we're asked about routinely. And then 2.5 really just goes on to some of the things. So where the chair is certainly on my one-to-ones, and PDR talked to me about capital programme. Some of the things that you have delivered as a fire authority there about the access and inclusion work was really about dignity in the workplace for staff to come in and be able to do it. We're coming to the end of that programme of work across our estates department and our on-call stations and wider. We've got new fire appliances that are landing pretty much week by week, which is a massive investment. 17 out of your 30 appliances being replaced. We've reviewed the technical rescue functionality, and we're moving into the design and implementation phase of that now to make sure that technical rescue is fit for the future, and that's been led by teams of officers with the support of many of our staff. We've continued to support White Ribbon as a kind of, that symbolic thing that we do, because that's a challenging thing within our communities and across the workforce. And community risk management, the information system we use to gather data, we've invested in technology and upgrading of those things as well. And again, if you think about some of the training we've done, we've moved compartment fire behaviour training, so firefighters with and breathing apparatus going into fires. We're now getting more extensive training at Ollerton, and that's been I've heard nothing but positives about that from staff. And it's also created efficiencies that we've reported about. We'll be able to spend more time training as opposed to travelling to training venues. So we've been able to do those sort of things. And you'll also see in there as well, we have mentioned reference around remediation action plan and the mayoral office. So that interaction with the mayor's office has been ongoing behind the scenes in some ways. But that just shows you about what we've done. And of course, and we'll come on to it in the exempt items today, the replacement mobilisation system with Derbyshire Fire and Rescue Service as our partner in that. So lots of things there, members. Hopefully you'll read that with an immense pride in terms of the appendix on those sorts of things. I cannot tell you in terms of as a chief fire officer, when I read these sorts of things, it really, really reminds you just why you come to work and the reward you get as a leader for what you do. Not everything's always rosy in a garden as an organisation. I think we've seen that in recent months, and I'll pay some cognizance to that. But we are serious about improving, and we are serious about what we do for our public. So really, as I sort of said, this is thanks to every single member of staff that is in the fire service, overseen by you as an authority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Craig. Councillor Battlements?
Yeah, I want to commend the report, obviously. The stats in 2.4 in the report are also highlighted on page 180 in the main bulk of the report. Show at a snapshot there the work that's being done. I'm sure the comms team here will be doing it, but getting that information out in short, readable form for posts that go on social media, for Facebook, Instagram, X, etc., I think is really important, because there's still a lot of misinformation with the public about what the fire service does, the wide range of work that the fire service does, and also the fact that the value for money, in effect, that people get from their council tax for the fire service is incredible when you look at those sort of stats. So I hope that the comms team will circulate that in forms on social media. I think if they can also send a pack of those posts to each councillor on the fire authority, then whatever different types of social media some of us might be on, we can then use as appropriate for those things, because I think we should all be proud of what's being done, and as elected councillors on the committee, I think we can all jointly share that.
Councillor Butler?
Thank you. Very much along the same lines, actually. Vital and important as all the finance reports are, this report is the one that will connect with us as an authority, but also with the public and businesses out there, because that's what we do. And in fact, you could hear from what the Chief was saying, how proud he is. And those of us on the Community Safety Committee get a lot of this information as part of our committee and before the rest of the authority. So it comes as no surprise to me to read all the work that we're doing and everything that we have done. And really just to echo that it's such a detailed report and it's such a good read. Somehow we do need to shout about it more from the rooftops, because people out there, I suppose, take the fire service for granted until the day they need them, and most people don't realise everything that goes on in the background in terms of trying to prevent incidents, keep people safe, ensure buildings are safe, and it's what we do. And this is, if you haven't all I know everyone will have read the report, but if you hadn't, please do so, because it's something to be really proud of. So really well done, everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Very much on the same theme, that we need to up our press releases, etc. There's a whole year's worth of good press releases here, but it's also looking at those incidences and remind people on the majority of those incidents, our staff are putting their lives on the line in a lot of those cases. But I still don't know how you get to all these things in 8 minutes and 7 seconds. There must be, I want one of those engines in my car. But yeah, it's really up in this and getting out there so people know. We can chat a comment, but they need to know they've got a very, very good service in Notts.
Thank you. It's just in respect to 2.5 and the white ribbon, and it's just a question that I've got. Do you work with any local community groups in the areas to help support them with white ribbon? I'm thinking of one in particular within Gadling that I work closely with.
I couldn't give you where they specifically are, but if we're in communities with those particular issues as partners, then yes, we certainly do counsel it, yes. We also do some of the days where we try to do an event this year we had to end up cancelling because of other partners engaging in it. So we try and raise the profile. So we had a football event last year, we tried to do it this year because we couldn't get the buy-in with others. So we try and raise the profile across women and young girls. As well, we're also tied into through the National Fire Chiefs Council with the work we do in community engagement and prevention as well. So what you'll see sometimes is where we're doing, say, a safeguarding issue because somebody is at risk, we'll do extra wraparounds in terms of their property as well, and they can come through from referrals on community groups or just interested persons in the public.
Thank you. In particular, I'm thinking of Gadling and a particular charity or community group that I'm looking at work very closely with the youth mayor of Gadling because the statistics with domestic violence against young ladies is quite shockingly high. So if we can talk outside of here, it would be really helpful.
You've got Tom at the back of the room who's their manager and Damon's here as well in terms of picking some of that up. Councillor.
Thank you.
Councillor Riaz?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a statement. Actually, I had an accident 2 weeks ago. I collided my car in my wall, and I was really surprised how within 7 to 8 minutes the officer were there, and it was amazing. And they were there for an hour with me, trying to comfort me. And so I'm really happy. Thank you so much for your hard work, Damon. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. It's almost like we know what we're doing, isn't it?
Councillor Lee?
Thank you. It would be amiss of me not to mention the incident that we had this week / last week in York Drive to do with the flats that were on fire. And I'd just like, and I say this every meeting, and one of my colleagues to my right always jokes that there seems to be lots of fires in Newark, and there is. We have lots of incidents in Newark, but there was a flat fire where 2 flats were completely damaged where the roofs have collapsed, and 7 fires had to be evacuated. I'm glad to say we had no casualties, and that is unbelievable to say in a built-up area where 7 flats are on fire. To have 0 casualties is a credit to our staff, to the district council who came out to help, but a credit to everybody there that we weren't saying some bad news today. So I want to just say thank you to everybody, because I believe there was 8 appliances, maybe 9 appliances that turned up. So it is great news. Thank you very much.
I think it's just to really, echo what's been said. I mean, it's a real testament to the fire service. I think, as members, we need to, heartfelt thank yous to all the staff, because they go out each and every day and put themselves on the line. And there's a lot of noise out there, politically and otherwise. So I return the point with Councillor Battermuch and press releases that we really need to be shouting very loud about the work that we do on the fire service, actually keeping people safe. And as you said, Councillor Riaz, they turned up quickly. I was in a particular accident, and they came up. The time that they took to come around was amazing. So I think ICTO's chair has been really, really proud to chair the fire authority, I'm sure as members, we all collectively are proud of what the fire service does, and we hope, as part of the mayor's model, will continue to do so and not lose its identity as part of that model. Any other questions of Councillor Ray?
Yeah, and I'll just echo that. I mean, I've been with the Fire Authority for some time, obviously I sit on community safety and HR. The level of professionalism with officers is brilliant. Everyone's on hand. The detail that we've had, and I think I'd echo what Craig said as well. I mean, if you look at the sort of there's an ethos of public service that goes straight through the service, which you're very, very proud of. And you look at this and you think, well, it's absolutely superb to see that. And people can be quite cynical in life sometimes about public service. But I think, from this Fire Authority, that's what's really shone through to me over the years, the commitment. And also when you look at, what we've been dealing with in finances, but when you look at some of these statistics, which are impressive in themselves, but it just shows there's an increase in everything. We're talking about the environment or fire or heat waves. I believe we're getting another one in August. I'm booking myself to Skegness, and I'm thinking that's great. But then when you look at it, actually, there's a 29% increase in fires. We've got these resources, and yet our staff are actually going to more things. We've had a large number of false alarms has gone up, for example. Incidents have gone up by at least 2,000. So actually, we're attending more incidents. We have more fires. There's more risk, and we're managing to do that. Hugely effectively, which I think is a fantastic source of pride, but it's also a word of caution, isn't it, in terms of how often these things are actually going up. But I think the stats are marvellous. When we talk on community safety, obviously Jate in terms of the city and the inspections that have been done, and a much more, as Craig was talking about, complex built environment, as tower blocks going up, and we've got more student accommodation and so on, and we've really risen to those sort of challenges, and I think that is something to celebrate. I do think actually some of our communications I've seen on Twitter and elsewhere are actually been really quite good, and they've had individual officers on, etc., and I'd encourage people to look at them. But and from me, I think other people in authority, so it is a word of thanks to all our staff who do an absolutely marvellous job and in increasingly challenging circumstances. Thank you.
And with that, I'm sure we can move to approving the annual statement of assurance for 25-26 publication. Thank you. Right, Craig, can we move on to item 9, statements of pay policy, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, members, this comes with a nice, if you read it online, a nice colourful document. If you've got it in your papers, I'm going to avoid talking about anything in the appendix for fear that there might be different colours in it. So, yeah, all I'll do is I'll stick to the headlines on it. So this was brought out by the Localism Act in terms of the context of the environment at that time about equal pay, and it was a requirement to make sure we do a statement of pay policy. So the requirements are laid out in the report in the first sort of area sections 2.1 and onwards, and it makes some real statements in there. And there are some areas that this year that have come to light for us through increasing in pay nationally and other things. So there's some areas of work that we'll do, and that may need to either come back to full fire authority or HR committee for discussion or approval. And there'll be some work that we'll do with our HR professionals and the clerk as well, just to make sure that the fire authority, whether it be scheme of delegations or your constitution, there's a couple of areas potentially that we might need to come back and have a discussion around, just because of when this was set and thresholds were set. That was 2011, and the world's moved on quite significantly since then. This basically makes it obvious in terms of your authority appointed officers around pay scales and details and pay bands, and where those pay bands originate from to give you guidance as a fire authority. So there are things in there like your chief fire officer, your assistant chiefs, in terms of the pay scales that they have. More importantly, as you come down through to pay policy on 2.10 though, it starts to talk about some of the averages around gender pay gaps. Thankfully, as a service, we have moved on incrementally, and I will sort of say it like that, incrementally, because of the way the Fire and Rescue Service still recruits and is likely to carry on to recruit that more single-tier entry. It takes time, a lot longer time for women in the organisation to reach, or more a percentage of the workforce to reach those higher levels of pay. So where it talks about mean pay differences and median pay differences, this isn't because, and it's clear in the report as well, this isn't because on the basis of sex or gender that we pay different hourly rates. This is because we have more men at senior levels than we do women at senior levels. So I wouldn't want you to think that there are we pay somebody differently for the same or significantly majority of the same role differently based on their sex, because we don't. They are laid out in NJC local government schemes of pay and final points, or they're laid out in NJC grey book terms and conditions of national rates of pay. So your area managers here, for example, they get the same base pay, whether they are green book or grey book. The only difference is that then when they start that grey book, area managers are on 20% flexible duty, providing flex cover and operational cover. So it's those elements that change the pay differential. There are sort of things in there about compensation payments as a result of redundancy, and it references the paragraphs within the appendix as you go through. So I guess really, Chair, that's all I wanted to sort of say. The detail is in the appendix, but I'm happy to take any questions. If I can't answer them, or Leila or anybody else in the room, we'll sort of get back to individual councillors if there's an issue where you require any information we can't give you today. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Ray?
Yes, thanks, Chief. I just echo, obviously, I chair the HR committee, and obviously we've looked at the gender pay gap amongst other things and equalities in depth. And just one thing to say to people who are watching, obviously, the nature of our workforce. One, it's good news in terms of we retain the workforce for some time period. Our operational workforce tends to be overwhelmingly male for reasons that people know, and therefore people in senior roles and other roles therefore tend to be men, which creates us with a problem because one, we retain staff because we're a good place to work, and two, the nature of it. So obviously we've been working on that and there are actually improvements here, but it's for the public to know that we do take that seriously, but obviously we are almost at a disadvantage. I won't compare it to the armed forces or anything, but obviously the nature of a lot of our workforce is going to mean that we will have these gaps that we look at seriously. But as the Chief says, obviously we don't pay people differently. We've made great strides. We look in depth that we can do to actually promote, recruit women and people from other underrepresented groups in order to make that improvement. Because our workforce is, if you like, much stable, that is going to take some time, and it just will do. So in many ways, it's a positive thing, even though parts of it possibly could be criticised.
Councillor Costner?
Yeah, it was on exactly the same point that Councillor Rain talked about, which is about the difference of the gender pay gap. And I know, I can see from the papers it has been reduced massively since 2017, and I just want to say this is excellent testament of qualities work within the authority. But I wanted to know, does that mean that there are more women now in senior posts, or is this reflective of something else?
Yes, there's more women in senior posts, and I'll sort of say, obviously, one of your assistant chief fire officers now is a woman. Not the first woman assistant chief fire officer, but a woman, and we are beginning to see more women in the organisation reaching more senior roles. So one of the area managers, Maria, is classed as kind of area manager plus sort of thing in the organisation. I think because the masters of your workforce are either on-call or all-time firefighters, we are trying to work really hard through our community engagement and through positive action. Some of the tweaks we did a couple of 3 years ago about that positive action being a continuous thing, and people out there from minoritised groups have got to see that this is an opportunity for them, because I think still the fire service projects that it needs to look like me, and when it doesn't all need to look like me at all, far from it, in all honesty. It'd be my wish for the future. So we need to take the opportunities where it is. So what is there something else? We need to know that we're actually pushing in the right areas. And there is a message in there, because I think sometimes when people look at these videos and see that we're actually just trying to recruit people from minoritized groups, we are trying to recruit the best people for this job. We're just trying to say to those communities, this is an option and an opportunity for you too. Do not think it's reinforcing older stereotypes.
Any other questions? Members happy to approve the statement of pay policy?
Ready.
Move on to item 10, changes to establishment and reports.
That's myself, thank you, Chair. So this is the annual report that's provided to the authority, which reviews the permanent changes to establishment that have been completed under the Chief Fire Officer's delegated powers for the financial year 25-26. So the report covers all of the posts that have been either created, deleted, or posts that have been re-evaluated through our job evaluation scheme over the last financial year. So at section 2.2, you'll see that we have deleted 12 posts from the Green Book establishment. That sounds more dramatic than it actually is. 11 of those posts were related to a restructure that was undertaken within our ICT department. This was a cost-neutral restructure, so you'll see that 11 posts have been deleted, and then also if you move to section 2.4, you'll see 11 posts have also been created. The other post which was deleted within the year was a fire investigation and arson reduction officer post, which had been vacant for 2 years and resulted in around about £52,000 worth of savings, which were accounted for as part of the prevention restructure. With regards to the other new posts that have been created, just to draw members' attention to the additional occupational health nurse advisor that we have created in the establishment. This is in response to a building need that we're seeing within the organisation, and also the commitment that the organisation has to welfare and well-being of the workforce. And the other 4 posts that have been created are related to our joint hosting of the Local Resilience Forum Secretariat with Nottinghamshire Police. The service is the employing authority for those posts, and you'll see that they're funded through a combination of government grant, partner contribution, and also the contribution from our own budget towards that. Section 2.5 sets out the regraded posts that have occurred through the year. So there are 3 posts that have been regraded. You'll see those set out section 2.5 alongside the reason for the regrade. So that was all I wanted to say. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions if there are any.
Councillor Lane?
Yeah, sorry, it's me again. Just to reiterate with people in terms of occupational health, we've had some issues in terms of sickness, particularly in terms of, we're looking at mental health problems and also musculoskeletal issues, because we've got colleagues waiting for operations, etc., which is causing us to have some sickness issues. So, I mean, I think with the occupational health post, hopefully, that will help us with some of the sickness that we're monitoring, trying to get down for colleagues. So I think that's a welcome change.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Members happy to note the report?
Noted.
I think it's committee outcomes. I think the members have those for. Now we move to exclusion of the public. To consider excluding the public from the meeting during consideration of the remaining items in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under section 12A part 1 paragraph 3 on the basis that having regard to all these circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information because it contains commercial sensitive information in respect of companies. Are we agreed?